Okay, so I am going to call the meeting to order. We do have a quorum this evening. It is 6:30 p.m. on Thursday, July 30th, 2020. This is a special meeting of Intermediate District 287. This is a live stream meeting that will be recorded as well as live stream on the District 287 YouTube channel. The link for this meeting will be posted on the 287 website in the school board section. The public is always invited to share their thoughts and comments with the board. We ask that people who wish to address the board, please complete the virtual meeting request form that is on the 287 website in the school board section. Written comments received by 4:30 p.m. on the day of the board meeting will be read at the beginning of the meeting. So we'll begin this evening with the reading of our mission statement. And Heather Douglas, would you please read our 287 mission?
Yes, I will. The mission of Intermediate District 287 is to be the premier provider of innovative, specialized services to ensure that each member district can meet the unique learning needs of its students.
Thank you so much. And we'll now have board member introductions. Crystal, if you could please call us out in alphabetical order so that we can introduce ourselves and the districts we represent.
Absolutely. We will start with Adams.
Steve Adams, Hopkins School District.
And I am Crystal Brackey from Richfield Public Schools. Casey.
Ann Casey, proudly representing St. Louis Park Public Schools.
Keene.
Hi, Andrea Keene, Wayzata Public Schools.
Dallas.
Hi, Ruthie Dallas from Brooklyn Center Community Schools, 286.
Douglas.
Heather Douglas for District 279, Osseo Area Schools.
Coons.
Hi, Michelle Kuntz for Orono Public Schools.
Marty.
Hi, I'm Heidi Marty, representing West Tonka Public Schools.
Neville.
Hi, I'm Regina Neville, and I represent Edina Public Schools.
Looks like Sam may have dropped off. Sam, can you hear me?
I'm here, yep.
Okay, fantastic.
Sam Sant, Robbinsville 281.
Thank you. And I do not see Adam. Is that accurate?
I do not see him either. So he may be able to join us later, but we will move on for this point in time. Welcome, board members. These are the staff members who are with us this evening. We have Tanya Allen, Michelle Axel, Sean Garvey, Radius Guess, May Hawkins, Kim Helgeson, Rachel Hicks, Superintendent Sandy Lewandowski, Ben McGrath, Juanine Mgini, and Jonathan Voss. Are there any staff members that I accidentally missed? Welcome, staff. Glad to have you with us this evening. I'm going to do a walk through our meeting agenda. We will have our general consent agenda, and then our superintendent's report will include information about innovative distance learning for the upcoming 2021 school year, as well as a summer racial equity report. We'll have an instructional report regarding our literacy grant award and Minnesota Partnership for Curriculum Collaboration. There's no business report this evening. Our board business report includes a policy review with a Title IX emergency policy, and we'll hear more about that when we get to that point in the agenda. And then we'll close out with AMSD report and calendar for the upcoming school year. Are there any additions to the agenda? Hearing none, I move that we accept the agenda. Is there a second?
A second.
Seconded by Sam Sant. Crystal, would you please call the roll?
Adams.
Hi.
Brackey is an I. Casey.
Aye.
Keene.
Hi.
Dallas.
Yes.
Douglas.
Aye.
Kuntz.
Got her mic. She's muted.
Okay, Michelle, I'm going to come back to you momentarily. Marty.
Aye.
Neville.
Aye.
Sant.
Yes.
And now I don't see Michelle. So I think we should keep moving.
I think we have enough, a majority vote for yes, so our agenda is approved. Thank you, everyone. And I might offer just a protocol adjustment for virtual meetings because we've been doing this for a while. And my own experience is that it's probably okay to stay unmuted unless you're aware of some environmental distraction wherever you are officing right now. That you choose to be muted, totally fine. But if you find that you're in a quiet space and would like to remain unmuted, I would invite you to give that a try and we'll see how that goes. We can always remute as needed. We will now move on to audience opportunity to speak. Juanine, is there anyone who has submitted a request to address the board this evening? And she may have needed to step away as well. I know that she mentioned earlier that there were no requests submitted. So we will move forward with the agenda. Sorry.
Sorry, I was talking to Michelle. And no, there was no request.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We will now have approval of the consent agenda. Are there any items that anyone would like to have removed from the consent agenda for separate consideration? Is there a motion to accept the consent agenda as printed?
I move that we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Moved by Steve
Second.
and seconded, I'm sorry.
Heather Douglas.
Seconded by Heather Douglas. Thank you. Crystal, would you please call the roll?
Adams.
Aye.
Brackey is an aye. Casey.
Aye.
Keen.
Yes.
Dallas.
Yes.
Douglas.
Aye.
Kuntz. I think she's still not with us. Marty.
Aye.
Neville.
Aye.
Sant.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you, everyone. Our next item up is our superintendent's report. So Sandy, thank you for offering these updates on our upcoming school year.
Thank you and good evening, everyone. Happy to see everyone. And as Andrea suggested, it has been quite a day. We've gotten a lot of information to process this evening and beyond this evening. And that's part of our intent here tonight. Many of you in your districts are obviously doing the same thing, trying to both build a plan and wait for guidance and direction from the governor. And those two things are coming together this evening. So we're pleased tonight to share with you our draft plan. And Ben McGrath is going to explain that plan. We do have a few important things to sort out yet, given the verbal guidance that we received today. I already have a request into the Department of Education for one of those consultation sessions they mentioned. I put it in about 2 minutes after I got the email from MDE. So I'm hoping I got somewhere near the front of the line, but there are questions that we need to get further guidance and clarification on. That said, we feel the plan that we have been working on really does fit pretty nicely into the structure and the plan that the governor announced today. So with that, I'm going to ask Ben to present that plan to date. And then I'll make a couple comments at the end of that and we'll open it up for questions. So Ben.
All right, thank you, Superintendent Lewandowski, Madam Chair Neville, members of the board. Let me get set up here. Everybody seeing my screen okay here?
Yes.
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 Okay. Well, thanks again for giving us the opportunity to be here tonight and share an update on where we're at. Again, as Sandy mentioned, that certainly this is an update on a draft of where we are to date. There's likely to be changes and modifications as we go based on what we heard today and the ongoing and continued feedback that we get from our staff, our students, and our families. One of the ways that we are organizing our work is to ensure that we're having the voices of many staff and stakeholders in this work. One of those teams is a planning team with all of the members on the screen that you see here. This team has been critical in bringing various stakeholders and perspectives to our planning team and shaping the plan that you're going to see tonight, and will continue to shape the plan as we go forward. It has not been just this team, as we'll talk about here in just a little bit. We've had survey data from our staff multiple times, survey data from our families. We'll share a little bit about our family virtual town halls that we've held. We've included feedback opportunities from our member districts, superintendents, and we'll get to that in a little bit, but want to just say here that we certainly view this work as taking a village to be able to put a plan together, and the folks that you see here have been integral to making that happen. We've also made some promises to ourselves, to our staff, to our students and families about what they can expect from us during COVID-19 and school closure and during this pandemic. And this is nothing new for our district in 287, but maybe more so true here, and principles, PLE, that we want to make sure that we use as a guiding practice in our work. We know that safety and well-being is going to come first, and that our staff and our students need to feel safe before we can get to the academic and emotional support that they need. We know that we work better when we engage our staff and our families to understand their perspectives on how we can serve our students best. And that we have a racial equity lens on all of our decisions, and that we have a racial equity lens in how we think about serving our students and ensuring that we are disrupting the achievement gap that plagues Minnesota. We've been committed to becoming a trauma-sensitive and healing center district prior to the pandemic. We know even more so that with the pandemic, our work to become that trauma-sensitive district is important, and it's the right work for us to do. In particular, we know that from the killing and murder of George Floyd and the racial injustice that we've seen in the Twin Cities and across the country, that our students have experienced a lot of racial trauma. And even more so because of the pandemic and because of the racial injustice that we've witnessed over this past summer, we're committed to our work on becoming a trauma-sensitive organization. I mentioned earlier that part of the way that we viewed our work from the beginning was to ensure that we had feedback from multiple stakeholders and that we engaged multiple people in the process, that it was not a plan that was being created by a few people in a room, but it was a plan that was going to be co-created with all of the different stakeholders that you saw earlier and in the multiple ways that you see now on your screen. Most recently, we issued another staff survey, and almost 800 responses to that survey is about an 86% response rate. So we feel really good about the voice of our staff through that survey and the voice of our staff through the planning team and the encouragement that we have sent for them to communicate to their supervisors and other stakeholders. We've also reported recently, a few months ago at the board, about how we wanted to be more intentional about hearing the voices of our families, that we knew that an electronic survey wasn't sufficient to ensure that we were hearing from the voices of our community. And to that end, Tanya Allen has done an outstanding job of holding virtual engagement sessions in English and Spanish and Somali. And then we have a staff survey where we had nearly half of the responses being people of color. We've also shared our draft plan, as you may know, with superintendents, special education directors, transportation leaders, and business and finance directors. All part of the process for us to get to where we are today, which is still, again, a draft and a work in progress, but through the village that we've created and the multiple stakeholders, we feel like we're on the right track in our planning. To share a little bit of survey results here, what you're looking at is a couple different things. On the top right side of your screen, that's the staff level of concern. On the left, you can see the color codes and how they correlate to extremely concerned, very concerned, somewhat, and not at all. And the point that I want to make here on the top part in regards to the staff survey is that in option 1, which is a full return to school, the overwhelming amount of responses there were in extremely and very concerned. Less so in option 2, a hybrid approach that we've been talking about, and even less so in distance learning. But when we look at the survey results from the family survey, which is in the bottom right-hand part of your screen, you see similarly that there's a lot of concern about returning to school in a full in-person format. But there's also a lot of concern about distance learning, as you can see on the bottom right part of that, part of the screen and in the graphic. That option 2 is really the option where you see that the number of responses that are extremely concerned and very concerned is the smallest. So there's some difference between what we've heard from our staff about their thoughts on the 3 different options for returning to school and what families are reporting. We've also seen a little bit of variation in our white families and our families of color in terms of their responses. And we wanted to share this graphic here for really 2 reasons. One is that we wanted to share and show that for our families of color, for the most part, they're similarly concerned across the 3 different approaches. But for our white families, they're in distance learning, there's more of a discrepancy in terms of how they feel concerned about being in that model of instructional delivery. We also wanted to have this here as an example to be able to show and share how we're disaggregating all of our data. One of the commitments that we made a few months ago was to ask racial identification data on all of our surveys. And that's allowed us to disaggregate all of our data by race, which has been really helpful as we think about how might we need to think about our response differently and ensure that we're not leaving out certain groups of people in our process for coming back to school. There's a lot of words and language on this screen, so and I think the next one is going to share this and explain this better than what you see here. But I'll call out a couple key points. One is what you see underlined and in bold, that all families will have the choice to keep their student at home no matter the step. That's something that we heard earlier today from the governor about their expectation that that is an option for any student and family who chooses to have that as their primary method of instructional delivery. Our plan really has 4 steps, and we created the 4 steps because we felt it was important that we had some definition to what we mean by hybrid. So by now we've all become familiar with hybrid learning as an approach to how we might return to school in the fall. But what exactly does hybrid mean? And how could we think about hybrid in multiple ways rather than just simply either all students are back or some are back or none are back? And so that's what you're going to see here on this next slide is really this idea of trying to think about what hybrid means and how it could really work and look in a district that serves unique students such as 287. So those 4 steps that you see here, which starts with a step 0, that's innovative distance learning. Now, this might be most similarly thought of how we ended last school year and how we delivered instruction in those final few months of the 2019-2020 school year. But we don't want to just communicate that step 0 is the same thing that we did in the spring. We know from our own surveys and from surveys across the state that wasn't good enough for many of our families, and it wasn't good enough for us. That we wanted to be better, and we know that we can be better and we will be better in the way that we think about distance learning as we go into the fall. The steps that you see on the right, steps 1, step 2, and step 3, those are gradual build-ins of how we think about a hybrid approach. So for example, in step 1, that we're thinking about this as in 2 groups of students returning to school. A group of students would come on a Monday and Tuesday pattern. Another group of students would come on a Thursday, Friday pattern. And by having 2 different groups within 1 week, that in step 1, we could serve about 20% of our students and still keep our building and staff capacity closer to 10%. That in all of these steps that we're thinking and what we know about how the virus is spread is that it is less so in earlier grades, and that's informed our thinking as we think about how we might phase in certain grades into each of these different steps. So we've begun the work of determining how many students we have at each grade band, and so that we could slot them into the different steps as we progress through these different steps of returning to full in school. Again, we think that one of the values in this approach is that we've really thought about what can we learn as we start to bring students and staff back into our building. We all know the unique needs that our students present to us and how we serve them in in-person schooling. And we believe that there's a lot to learn as we gradually welcome them back into our school. So rather than having them all back in each of those 2 days in those groupings, that a phased-in approach will allow us to learn about what's working, what's not working, and continue to make our experience for our students and families better and ensure the safety of everybody. I also want to add here that right now, our plan is that those 2 groups meet on Monday and Tuesday and Thursday and Friday, with Wednesday being a day where we will disinfect our buildings, that we'll continue with distance learning, and we'll also build in professional development for our staff. But that's subject to alignment to member districts or to our thoughts about how we might do that differently. For example, our understanding is that Osseo is considering a similar model, but with Friday being that day for disinfecting professional development. And that's one example of a potential change that we could make in our current model. It's also likely, based on what we heard earlier today, what we know about the localized decision-making based on the rates of infection, that we're probably somewhere around step 0 as we think about starting the fall school year. But there's also a possibility that as we continue to learn more and we develop our plan, that we could make a step forward into step 1. But right now, generally, our thinking is that we're likely to be closer to a step 0. I mentioned this earlier, and I think that we also talked about this a few months ago at another board meeting, that if when we talked about back in May is that we just want to get back to school as usual, then I don't know that I want that. And I don't know that I want to go back to the achievement gap that is the greatest in the nation in the state of Minnesota. I don't know that I want to go back to the kind of disparities in educational outcomes for our kids of color, particularly our Black and Latino students. And our commitment to racial equity, our commitment to trauma-informed practices has really informed the way that we've thought about not just returning potentially in distance learning, but returning with a better version of that. Because we don't want to continue to contribute in any kind of way to those disparities. So we've thought about how to make it better and how to make it stronger. And some of those ideas are what you see on the screen. Ideas like ensuring that we have clear expectations around regular live in-person contact from a teacher to a family and a student. That we have clearly established ways for our staff members to connect with students and be a mentor. We knew that social connection was so important for our kids. And we want to learn from what we experienced in the spring and make it better, and having students with mentors as an example. We also know that the beginning of school can be an anxious time for students and families. And again, that connection with students and families is so important that if we can meet in person and make that work in perhaps an outdoor setting, then that would be a priority for us as we think about the start of the school year. And the last one, I think that maybe I'll call out 2 more. One is that weekly mental health support, that we want to make sure that we have clear plans that are responsive, that all students are getting mental health support that they need, and those that need more are getting more. And the last one that I wanted to call out is the last one on the screen, number 6. We'll talk about race and racial trauma with students and staff. Our belief is that we have an obligation to engage our students in conversations about race and racial trauma, that we've all been a part, especially in this community in Minneapolis, of, again, the murder of George Floyd and the racial injustice that we've all become acutely aware of. And we have a responsibility, I think, to respond to that as educators and engage our students in conversations, both because it's relevant to their learning and because we need to provide support to them in their racial trauma and any other trauma that they've experienced. I've really mentioned this already, and again, we've heard that we want to improve that pathway one, all pathways that we want to improve. In pathway one, John Voss and I were just talking earlier today and reviewing some of the data, and what we came back to was learning and maybe relearning that less than 5% of our teachers reported that their primary instructional delivery pathway in the spring was non-digital work. That number was 4.88%, I believe. And in some buildings, it was a little bit higher than that. But the point I want to make is that the vast majority of our teachers were finding ways to connect with their students, at least at times in a digitally managed way. And they were connecting with them on Google Hangouts and Zoom and in other formats. So we really want to make sure that as we think about how we can do this better, that we're emphasizing what you're seeing as pathway 2 and pathway 3, because the vast majority of our teachers were already there, and we can help develop their ability to deliver instruction in those different modalities even more so than what we did before. Really connected to that is a couple other things that we've been talking about. And I mentioned John and Tanya previously, and this slide's really a credit to their leadership and their work in our district. Starting on the right, we've talked about how we could be more innovative and thoughtful about how we're including our family voice in our back to school planning. That we've already begun that work, again, under Tanya's leadership, to hear their voice and engage them in the process. But we've also thought about how we can provide better support for them once we do come back into our approach for learning in the fall, and offering trainings and videos that they can access to help them learn about how to support their students even better than what they did before. So we have lots of ideas about how we can do that portion of our work even better than what we did before. John's leadership has also led us to develop more courses that you see there on your screen about ethnic studies and action civics and social justice math and inquiry-based science. That John's been meeting and leading a group of teachers and other leaders to develop more courses and unit plans in all of these areas to ensure that we have spaces for our students to be able to talk about issues at hand in our society today. We're also rethinking the way that we can use our one-to-one educational assistants and how they might be able to be used as either mentors or to support our students in practicing and skill reinforcement. But the big idea being that we think that we have excellent staff in our district, and we want to make sure that we're fully utilizing all of our staff because our kids need them. We also know that when we do, in whatever version, come back to an in-school person format in one of those steps that we were sharing earlier, that we have a lot to figure out. We have a lot to figure out around how we're going to do social distancing in a district like 287, how we're going to ensure that masks are worn in our schools, especially with older students, how we're going to incorporate routines around hand washing and sanitizing throughout the day, and how to handle pickup and drop off and transition through hallways. But all these safety practices that we hear so much about in media are all things that we've been thinking about. What does that actually look like in school? And how are we going to make sure that we do this when we put students with unique needs into our classrooms and into our hallways? So these are all, and this is not all of them, these are part of the safety practices that we're wrestling with, that lots of folks are wrestling with, that we're still trying to really resolve in terms of what we heard about recommendations from MDE and MDH earlier around masks and social distancing, and how we can do that in a district like ours. And finally, we're thankful that we've set up some of the structures and systems that I started with around our planning team, gathering feedback from various stakeholders, from students, families, staff members, And our next steps are to take what we've learned earlier today from the governor and MDE and MDH and really incorporate that into our plans, into our teams, into our interrogation of the current plan that we're working from. And we'll continue through weekly plans that are starting, weekly communications that are starting on Monday to share messages with our staff and with our families around our update for how we're continuing to move forward. So with that, I will invite my colleagues, John, Tanya, others, Superintendent Lewandowski, to join me in helping to answer any questions that you might have.
And while you think about those questions, I just want to reiterate a couple of things that Ben mentioned and many of you heard with the governor's press conference today, that we do face some unique situations in District 287. One example, is keeping 6 feet of distance between each other is simply just not possible for a certain portion of our student population. They may need one-to-one touch to stay safe or to be guided down the hallway, or they may sometimes make a move that isn't a planned move and put themselves in other people's spaces. And that all takes a lot of thinking to think how we might do that. And that example represents part of why we're leaning toward that step 0. We want to really think through and then move in small numbers to getting this right. We know that there's a lot of anxiousness about coming back to school on the part of parents and staff. And so we feel that we're inclined to think the slower incremental stages will both build skills and understanding, and therefore a better culture and climate when we get to whatever level we end up getting to, which of course varies based on the case data that we're getting on a regular basis. So I also want to thank our planning team and our administrative team. They have worked endlessly in trying to get to this point. And as you might imagine, there's several additional sets of work to be done. So I'm really grateful for all the help that we've received getting to this point. And with that, I'll just stop and open it up for questions.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. Thanks, everyone. We do have a couple of raised hands. Crystal Brecky, followed by Sam Sant. So maybe we'll start with Crystal, follow with Sam, and if others also have questions, if you could use the raised hand feature, we'll do my best to track it. So Crystal, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, Ruthie,
Sure.
whenever you can, my raised hand is not showing up. So.
Oh, well.
Go ahead, Ruthie. You can go first.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. I just had a question on when you were talking about the schedule of the students coming in, and you said the cleaning of the building would be done on Wednesday, was it? So do you do something on the weekend to prepare for Monday, or how does that work?
Yeah, that would be the plan. And then that's our thinking, is that we would welcome back some of our students, but then we would have some intermittent cleaning during the middle of the week, and then be able to come back on the weekend and do additional cleaning. Again, I think that's the current plan where we're thinking. I mentioned Osseo earlier. I know St. Paul's looking at a very similar model to what I just presented on a Monday, Tuesday, but they also have a Wednesday, Thursday day for in-person learning, and then also for them Friday is that day for distance learning and disinfecting. But right now our thinking is exactly what you're describing, is that we'll take that opportunity midweek between those sessions and provide cleaning, and then we'll be able to come back again on the weekend and do that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ruthie. Crystal.
Yeah, so I first just wanted to acknowledge that you all, I don't know, are maybe the first staff who are having to do this presentation after the announcement this afternoon. So I just wanted to appreciate that. I know in Richfield, there are questions swirling and flying and speculation and information and misinformation because this is complex and because of the amount of information that came out this afternoon, I think is really difficult for people to digest and make sense of. So I just wanted to appreciate this is happening really quickly as far as you bringing this to us at a board meeting. So appreciation for that. I think the question that I had is just if you know, can share more about how you are going to make that decision about starting the school year between step 0 and step 1. Obviously, the state level or county specific data for Hennepin County is going to be helpful, but we know like we have autonomy within that. And so I'm just curious to hear more. And I will say that I'm asking it from a point of view that I think the data that we have from families and staff is really helpful. And it also shows that a not insignificant percentage of people do want to come back and have some in-person options. So those are the things that I'm trying to weigh out and just getting a sense of how you are ultimately going to come to some of these decisions.
Yeah, that's obviously a very good question. And thank you for noting the quickness of between the governor's conference and this evening. It was a lot of information. I actually heard it twice, once on a commissioner call prior to the press conference, and then a second time, and I still have questions. So it certainly is a volume of information. And one of the things that we have access to, at least what I'm understanding at this point, is that consultation that the governor mentioned. And so my intent with even a quick request for a consultation is around that weighing the balance of knowing that we want to start getting kids into buildings and with their peers and their teachers versus some of those unique needs of our district as it relates to some of the safety standards that they set or talked about. I think it's also important to acknowledge, not unlike the entire state of Minnesota, we have staff who are concerned. I want to be candid about that, about coming back in, and again, in a school environment where we do have more touch going on, if you will, just by the nature of the disability of some of our students and the ability to keep those distances and other safety standards. So I think using that consultation from MDH and MDE will be a critical factor in that. We know that for summer planning, MDH said we clearly had made the correct decision. Things have changed, things have gotten better, but we also know we're 2 weeks, or I'm sorry, about a month out, 4 or 5 weeks till the start of school, and those case numbers could change again. So I think the key thing, Crystal, that I'll be looking for is guidance, particularly from MDH. And then further planning team conversations would be the 2 variables I'd be looking for.
If I can just add a little bit to that, if I was to flip over to my personal notes in terms of things that I think that we need to think about and work on next, one of the first bullets is around metrics to move from one step to the other. And so as we've laid out these steps from 0 to 1, 2, and 3, being clear about how we're thinking about we would move from one step to the next or back down from one step to the next is part of our next step in our work. And I'll acknowledge that part of that is what Sandy was just saying, certainly in terms of how we're starting. But then once we get going, utilizing metrics that we still need to identify, but likely to include things like feedback from the planning team that Sandy was mentioning, staff surveys, also the metrics that we got today, which I think was really nice to see, how the rates per 10,000 and how we can use that to understand how prevalent it is by county and what's the recommendation for learning based on that. So Part of our next steps is to name those metrics on how we might move from step to step, and so that we have some way to be able to determine this is the right next move, or we need to pause and we need to think about it differently because the pandemic has taken a turn.
Maybe I can also just mention, and Tanya, if you have further input, please do so. But one of the messages we heard from parents was actually a question about what did the staff think. So there's some give and play between what the parents think and depending to a certain extent on what the staff think. So that is still needing further clarification, but it is a factor that may be useful given your original question, Crystal. Tanya, do you have more to add to that, or is that sufficient?
Yeah, I would say, thank you, Sandy. I would say that the biggest thing that I would say, people were on all sorts of sides of the issue. However, I think universally they understand the unique needs of our students. Some about 20% or so of families identified, not all, but about 20% of those that did identify stated that their child has an underlying medical condition. So I think that's something worth bringing up as well as a factor that may be different than some of the member districts, in that being a significant population. And we did not ask about family members. We only asked about if they're identifying their child. So when you factor those pieces in, many of the families, even though they had very strong feelings, their biggest concern was that if we have to do distance learning, which if it came to that, it was really, they were very focused on solutions and suggestions to improve, which were all noted and have been communicated with principals. And that's a part of, I have to give a shout out to another colleague, Rachel, who has we've already started working on a family, what's called Family Vibes, her title, of really working to help to address some of the concerns that families have brought up about how do we do calming strategies at home? What are some of the things that you do in the school setting that we don't know how to do at home? And so, and as well as instructional focused things. How do we teach people, if we say partner read with your child, what does that mean? So breaking that down and having videos with staff featured in them. So we have a lot of energy around improvements that I believe will help address some of the significant concerns that were brought up. So thank you.
Thank you, Tanya.
Our next question will be from Sam Sant, followed by Andrea Keene. Sam, go ahead, please.
I have a few questions. So regarding the phases, like allowing up to 20% of the children to come back in phase one, and then up to 50%. How will that be determined? Amongst the elementary and middle school and high school is last, or is it based on the special needs of the child? How's that going to be determined?
Currently, our thinking is that we'll start with the youngest grades first. What we're learning, I think, all of us, both in education and across our country, is that the passing of the virus among younger students is less so than older students. And so our thinking is that we would start with our younger students first, and that we would use our understanding of the number of students in each of those grade bands and build up from there. So in that first, it might be kindergarten, first grade, and second grade. And in step two, we would add on additional grades after that. So again, our current thinking is that we would start with the grades first, and that would likely mean a couple of our grades in that first step one.
Got it. And then my second question is regarding transportation. How the kids be coming and going to school with practicing social distancing or whatever metrics the governor has provided.
Right, I can try an answer first on that, Ben, but feel free to add. As you probably are aware, transportation is complicated under the best of circumstances, especially when you add on the extra layer of the transportation is provided by each district sending the student. So they're working routes that take their kids to our sites on top of their routes taking kids into your own local buildings. And now the layer of different models, potentially and probably quite likely being different among our member districts, makes this into a real brain teaser. So that is indeed part of what we're trying to continue working with our member districts. We've been in contact with the transportation directors and business directors in your communities. We probably can't meet everybody's best case scenario, but we want to work to do it as well as we can for each of your districts. So that's how we're approaching it, but it will be a very detailed oriented kind of communication between the member district and 287.
Sam, do you have additional questions, or does that cover what you wanted to ask for now?
No, that covers it. Thank you.
Okay, next we'll hear from Andrea Keene. Andrea, go ahead.
Thanks, Regina. Well, my questions have actually been answered, but I would love to take this opportunity to say thank you. I can't believe how much work you guys have done over the summer. I think the plan looks great, and I can see a path forward. So I also want to thank you for disaggregating the survey data by race. I want to thank you for providing an opportunity for families to give feedback in a virtual town hall in English, Somali, and Spanish. I'm so impressed at the way that you have made efforts to hear feedback from all of our families and hear all of their needs. So just a big, huge thank you for your work.
Thank you, Andrea. And I just add on, this has been a tremendous communication effort and will obviously continue to be. And Tanya calling out Rachel's effort is exactly on the mark. She's been outstanding in trying to meet the needs of multiple communications internally and with families and with member districts. So special thanks to her as well.
Great, thanks. I think when I saw the governor's presentation today, so one of my first thoughts was that this puts a really heavy burden on all of our communications directors because it is complex. And I think the complexity gives nice flexibility to districts to do what's best, but it also is very confusing to parents. And then when you have the added layer of the unique needs of 287 students, I just think we're all going to have to give Rachel a lot of support. So that's all. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andrea. I have one question that I haven't heard addressed yet. I really appreciated the parts of the presentation that address the need to deliver additional mental health support and specifically doing a push-in to check in with our students and our staff. I'm curious if we have the current capacity to do that, or if we're finding that we need to add staff in certain areas or in any other areas to address this really flexible model.
Yes, thanks for the question, and it's a very good one. We've certainly been reminding MDE about our needs in an intermediate and as they relate to mental health, as well as several other corners that we could take this conversation, including Hennepin County, and just DHS, frankly. But I think for the starting of this year, we'd see it, the mental health support coming two ways. Obviously, we do a lot of that just through our social workers, school psychs, and just our work in trauma is based in, if you will, softer mental health, where we're building relationships. And again, Tanya's leading that effort. So the timeliness of beginning our trauma sensitive work last year is really helping us in that we're going to be better prepared as a whole staff with some of that knowledge as we begin to unfold it. Then we've got the layering of our, as I said, people like our school psychs, our social workers, our school counselors, that can provide a level of that. When we look at clinical mental health, I'm grateful for the budget that the board approved at our last meeting. We do have funds available for just this year. So I want to emphasize that we do not have money beyond this year to continue this, but we have made arrangements with Wilder to continue the TTM program at the North Education Center. They will also begin a program at the South Education Center for elementary kids that will not be the full TTM program, but it will include reflective consultation, which is basically supporting staff who are working with the complexity of high need mental health, students with high need mental health kinds of diagnoses, especially when they're in crisis. One of the critical components of mental health, as you've heard us say, is the staff have to be well in order for the students to be well. And part of that reflective consultation is to support the staff in processing some of the very complex situations they arrive at. So Wilder will also provide that at the South Education Center to the elementary staff, and they will provide a family therapist to begin working with 8 families of elementary kids. We did not have the funds to put a in-classroom therapist exactly like we did in the TTM program, but we have a very good foot in the door, if you will, with this model. And then finally, we also talked to Wilder about our high school kids at the Ann Bremer Education Center. It's been my belief that that is a very underserved population of students. And Wilder has a lot of experience working with the St. Paul schools in a program called COFI, which they've been doing successfully for a number of years, embedding mental health into various public schools. This would be a model like COFI, but it would be geared at the high school level. And it would hopefully really recognize some of the racial inequities that we see in that population of students in the program. And our hope, which they hope as well, is that we will be able to find a therapist who is a person of color to work in that program specifically. So those are the 3 areas. It is an expansion of our clinical mental health services. We're pleased to work with Wilder.
I think you're on mute.
Pardon me?
What?
Sorry, you'd gone mute for a while. I don't know if it was everybody else too, but.
Okay, sorry. Let me know again, Sam. Thank you.
Sorry.
At any rate, Wilder is certainly a great partner for our population. And I do want to publicly thank Wilder to get to that expanded level of service of clinical mental health therapy. They contribute $150,000 to that total package. So we're grateful for that partnership.
Thank you.
I have
Ruthie?
a question in regards to that. In working with the clinical therapists, which might entail closer interaction with the students, will there be any kind of, I'm not sure what's going on. Will there be any kind of testing of the kids when they go in for sessions with the therapist? And what's the plan for testing kids in the schools?
I'm sorry, Ruthie, the question around COVID testing for our students.
Right.
We have not talked about any kind of COVID testing for our students at this time. We talked about potentially temperature checks, but when and how that might look is still something that we're yet to determine. As far as the precautions that we might need to take with a clinical professional coming in closer contact with a student, that fits in with what we were talking earlier about ensuring that we can socially distance by 6 feet in those kinds of settings, that our staff are wearing masks, and that we're highly encouraging and getting as many students to wear masks as what we can. So those are currently the precautions that we're thinking about, but testing's not part of our current thinking.
And the mask is still optional, right? Will they be required to wear masks, the students and staff? I guess I know staff probably would be.
Right, and I'm not sure if we heard any additional guidance on that today, but I think that the Right now, our approach is that it's highly encouraged for our students, and again, we have to think about what's going to realistically work in a district like 287. That if we can and make it work, then certainly we want as many of our students and adults. The expectation for adults is that they would wear them, but we want as many people as possible wearing masks. But again, I think we're back to really working within the context that we have in 287 and trying to figure out what we can really accomplish in regards to masks with students.
Michelle Coons, you have a question.
Yes. So first of all, a huge thank you to you all. I can't imagine how you sleep at night, given all these terrible things that are coming out. One thing I'm worried about is that we might have more students homeless if they lose the $600 a week money, so that this could happen as soon as tomorrow, I understand. And also, how will they be fed? How will our kitchens support the students who are there? I mean, it's a very complex situation, I'm sure. But I'm assuming the staff would be there to provide the meals.
Right. Michelle, I'll let May answer that in just a second. I just want to acknowledge that you're right. We're concerned about the level of homelessness in general in a normal time, and certainly during this time, there's a lot of potential increase in that number. And I would just mention we do have a special team this summer checking in with some of our highest need families and students. Just to keep track of them should they be in a crisis situation and need further support. So we have authorized that and is in play right now. But we'll certainly be watching. I think one of the first things we want to do when we start the school year, no matter what step we start on, I think we are going to emphasize that contact between staff and family. We want to know how they're doing, how we can help, how we can support them. We do know that our population of families has a lot of challenges, and we want to be part of supporting them. So now I'll let May answer the food question.
Thank you, Sandy.
The guidance that we have right now is that when we start this school year this fall, we will be back in our regular food services program with USDA, so that our students would need to come to our sites to get meals. They couldn't go to the nearest district to get a meal.
Oh.
So but we are planning, if we're in distance learning, we're planning to have it so families can pick up 10 meals, right? So 5 breakfasts and 5 lunches, 1 time a week.
Right.
So we will be fully staffed and have everything ready for families to be fed.
Wonderful. Thank you, May.
If I can just add a little bit, Michelle, back to what Sandy was referencing over the summer. Our Summer Connections program that we started at the end of last year includes about 25 staff members, primarily mental health staff, social workers, psychologists, and others who are working to support our kids in multiple ways. But we knew that when we ended this school year, that we couldn't just cut off communication. That we wanted to provide that social and emotional support for our students. We wanted to be able to help families connect to community resources, and thankfully we had again about 25 staff members, most of who are our mental health staff, that said, absolutely, sign me up. I want to make sure that I'm part of a consistent way that we're going to connect with our kids over the summer, and they're still doing that work. In fact, we just sent a very short survey to them to learn more about their challenges, and that's part of how we're going to learn about what's worked, and in some cases what's not worked in terms of how we're going to provide that ongoing consistent support for our kids this fall.
Right. Thank you so much, Ben.
Thank you, everyone. Those are really good questions. Sandy, Ben, and Tanya and team, this is definitely a lot of effort, and we're truly grateful for everything that all of you have done. It feels like 287 is as prepared as we can be, given the level of unknowns and the need that we're going to continue to have to be flexible. We will respond as needed. There's just nothing truer than we're all in this together. And I'm grateful that this is the team I'm in together with, because it's really thoughtful planning. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll stay tuned as we continue to go forward. I know that this is something that we'll continue to learn more about day by day. Next, though, is our summer racial equity update. So Sandy, would you like to introduce this topic? And then Radius, welcome to have I believe this is your first formal presentation to the board. We're so excited to have you join us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yes, I think if you have not yet met Radius, Radius is our new Director of Equity and Inclusion. And although she has spent the first month learning about 287, she's already got several ideas underway. And we thought it'd be a good idea if she could just share a bit of a summary of where we're at right in this point in time, and possibly foreshadow some of the things we may see in the future. So I'll turn it over to Radius.
Good evening, Madam Chair Neville and members of the board. As was mentioned, Superintendent Lewandowski asked me to deliver a summer and beyond report of racial equity and the work that we're doing in the district. And I have asked Juanine if she'll support me and my video work. So next slide, please. So I wanted to start out by just with a definition of how we have defined our vision of racial equity for 287. And so in 287, racial equity is defined as the result achieved when one cannot predict advantage or disadvantage by race. And according to the Government Alliance for Race Equity, racial equity will be realized when race can no longer be used to predict life outcomes, and outcomes for all groups are improved. Next slide, please. We wanted to talk a little bit about, two slides. There, thank you. Okay, wanted to talk a little bit about where we have been, and recognizing, of course, that we really do have a long way to go, but we are so proud of what we have accomplished so far. And so right now, each one of our buildings and several of our district offices have racial equity teams, and they are working and doing some amazing work, and they meet monthly. We are using an equity lens to allow 287 to be intentionally inclusive in our decision-making processes. And these tools really do introduce a series of questions that will help us to focus on racial equity in our deliberations and in our outcomes. We are working to recruit and retain racially conscious and diverse staff, as well as a racial equity policy. And I did share with you the definition that we are using in our district for racial equity that do protect people of color. Staff of color, we've also provided some wonderful opportunities for them to be participating in affinity groups. We hosted a luncheon, and there were various support groups for those staff. And it's really nice because we have found much value in giving people with similar racial and ethnic backgrounds an opportunity to talk with each other about issues that are really important to them. Affinity groups are affording staff with an opportunity to practice unpacking some very difficult issues before joining discussions with a mixed group, as well as gaining some mutual support and learning that they do have a voice in making a difference. So those are just some of the things, or some of the experiences that staff of color have had in the affinity spaces. and of course, culturally specific therapists that are available to staff via our employee assistance program. Next slide, please. Some of the efforts that have had a direct impact on our students, Sandy has already spoken about the therapeutic teaching model. And I know that you all have seen the great media coverage that we've received for the support of the student safety coach model that we use here in 287, our district mobile response, the partnership that we have with Dr. Bruce Perry, and the amazing work that Tanya Allen has done on placing emphasis on racial equity and racial trauma to support Dr. Perry's work. There's been a tiered classroom model that equitably administers resources and is not racially predictable. The curriculum and instruction work that we are doing, culturally relevant units and courses. There's a rubric for reviewing cultural relevance of curriculum and instruction. I'm really excited about the work that I've partnered with John Voss and several of the instructional coaches around an ethnic curriculum, ethnic studies curriculum for students. And so we're really excited about that work that we're doing over in the curriculum and instruction department. Next slide, please. So you may be asking where we're going, and I wanted to provide you with an overview of some of the exciting things that we have planned for racial equity work in 2021. Building staff capacity to implement some of our district priorities, and of course, using a racial equity lens to do that. Racially equitable hiring practices and development of 287's anti-racist leadership program. And Sandy spoke about the partnership that we have with the Wilder Foundation and the 2 additional programs, Kofi and another school-based mental health program. Engaging with our staff and families of color, and Ben spoke eloquently about the work that Tanya is leading. The racial equity data reporting that Ben also spoke about, and the importance of disaggregating the data by race so that we can really see what the needs are, the unique needs of our students and family. So some of the things that are new this year that we are going to be introducing to staff are a year of learning. With Justice Leadership Solutions, with Resma Minicum, and the reading of his book, My Grandmother's Hands, which has gone to, I think, number 12 on the New York Times bestseller list. And so being a local author, as well as a racial trauma specialist, he's going to be supporting our work through a year of learning. We're looking at the implementation of what we're calling internal influencers. And the internal influencers represent the next step in our ongoing efforts to advance racial equity in our buildings and across our district. We will extend invitations to staff based on their current or anticipated work on racial equity, their current position in the district, and our level of influence with staff, students, and families. So the year of learning will also incorporate internal influencers and listening and learning sessions with our staff so that we can make sure that we're tailoring the work that we're doing around race equity to support their unique needs as well. Identifying internal influencers who will receive racial equity training and training for healing historical and racialized trauma. Next slide, please. So we have an opportunity as a district to listen, learn, acknowledge, educate, take inventory of our vision for racial equity. So at the end of 2019-20, the school year, we hosted several listening sessions with our educational assistants and staff of color to better understand their experience in the district. We will intentionally and more continuously engage and listen to our BIPOC staff and students. And BIPOC is our Black, Indigenous people of color. Over the 2021 school year, we are going to engage many more stakeholders to process learnings as well as to design what some of our action steps will be. Some of the initial themes that we have received from the preliminary feedback that we received from those listening sessions were BIPOC staff feel heard and valued and safe in 287. BIPOC staff have opportunities to advance professionally Leaders are among the first to acknowledge and grow in their learnings and actions. We address bias and ensure fair practices to resolve conflict. And our white body colleagues also speak out against injustice. So those are some of the initial themes that we received from the feedback from our educational assistants, and as well as some of our learning, our leaders within the district as well. Next slide, please. So ultimately, we believe that the year 2021 will bring an opportunity for 287 and its leaders to investigate honestly, that is, how our longstanding systems, policies, practices, beliefs, unintentionally or not, have created and continue to maintain racial inequity. We will operate with urgency and accountability to change. Next slide, please. So I believe that authentic listening and sharing are powerful forces for making individual and institutional change. So with that in mind, I would like to invite my colleagues to join me in responding to any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Radius. Really appreciate the presentation. I don't see any raised hands. Is there anyone looking for the button, or do you just, if you want to wave?
Andrea.
Andrea?
You're muted, Andrea.
Whoops, sorry about that. Thank you, Radius, for the great presentation. I think for the past couple of years, since I've been on the board, I've learned so much about equity. I've come so far on my journey because of serving on the board. So a question or maybe a request is just please continue to bring us along and continue to consider activities or anything that would help us to continue to grow and learn and make sure we can try to keep up with all the great work that's happening in the district.
Board Member Andrea, I do welcome that opportunity. And I do know that both Sandy and I spoke today about the possibility of some board development around the area of race equity. And so hopefully at a future meeting, we'll be talking a little bit more about what that might look like.
Thank you.
And Andrea, I would just add that Juanine will be sending an email to you about that book, My Grandmother's Hands. And so you can identify whether you want a hard copy or a digital copy. We want to get that book into your hands as well, so that you can begin that, learning process with us as well in regard to the book.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ruthie.
Thank you, Radius. Very good presentation. I was just wondering, you mentioned about other stakeholders that you're looking at. What kind of groups would that be?
Well, our very first meeting that we had, Director Dallas was speaking with our educational assistants and staff of color. That's one population that we have spoken to. We've also engaged with our directors, our district leaders also. We're looking at the possibility of engaging with our EAs who are white body, as well as many of our classroom teachers around the district. So those are some additional stakeholders that we're looking at having conversations with.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Michelle Coons, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Regina. Thank you so much, Radius, and welcome again. This is amazing work. And the more I listen to you, the more I realized how much lagging I am. And I would really welcome some board work, definitely, because I think we need to be all on the same page. And I come with history. I've been here a long time. And I do remember when Sandy was a very courageous person who fought for us to delve deeply into these issues. And I thank Sandy again for that. It's been an incredible journey so far, and yet there's so much more to do. I will tell you just quickly, I've been doing long walks with a friend over this period of time. And yesterday we did a downtown walk, and I noticed at Loring Park, it's tent city now. And I didn't see everybody, but I can surmise that most people there were people of color. And it's just shattering what's going on. And so anyway, but thank you so much. And I look forward to hearing from you again and you teaching us. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Coombs. I will say that when Sandy and I spoke on this morning, we talked a little bit about providing support to our board of directors in your role as organizational leaders, and to assist with your decision making to make sure that you're making decisions, or at least considering decisions, from a racial equity perspective.
Exactly. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions? Sam Sant, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Ms. Guest, for the presentation. It was great. I really liked what I heard, and the plans you have in place for the future. I think the second half of it, though, is implementing it and getting everyone, in the district and the staff to work with that in mind, and to give it their all and be honest with it. I think, we talk about at Robbinsdale that, these are the tough kinds of conversations we need to have with race and equity, white privilege, that do happen every day, that many people don't recognize in their subconsciousness. And I think to actually bring this forward and to educate our employees and staff is a great first step. So I'm excited to see how this works, and any help that you need from the board, we'd be more than happy to help. I know that I definitely will. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Sant.
Are there any additional questions or comments? Crystal Brecky, go ahead, please.
Yes.
I don't think
I'm waving and just want to, I think, underline what Sam just shared, which is, I think that board development work is obviously really important for us, but I think we also need to be held accountable. And I think need to know and need to hear the real experiences of our staff, and then figure out what does that mean for us as a board, and for our role in sort of the governance space, and as the people who are supporting and holding Sandy accountable. And so I just think that is important to say out loud. And I hope that our staff who might be watching this know that we need to be held accountable, because having the conversations and creating the space for the conversations is critical, but it is just the first step. And without action and people actually feeling as though we are caring and responding and doing things differently as a result, the conversations are only going to lead to more pain and more harm. And so I just wanted to make sure that I said that out loud. And then the only other thing I wanted to say is I'm so excited to hear about the ethnic studies curriculum that you mentioned, and really am pumped to hear more about what that's going to actually look like and be for our students moving forward. So thank you for that little preview of what's to come.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Director Brocky.
And if I could just add a short answer as well. Thank you, Crystal. You are absolutely right, of course. And to the same extent, our leadership team indeed is taking some of the feedback. And as you might imagine, the first time you hear what people really think rather than what you think, it's an eye-opening experience. And we'll hear more about that in the future. We have a little more work to do to sort it out with the people that ran those groups. But I think that initial set of feedback already has provided a number of different topics that we can tackle almost immediately over the course of this year. But we have a little more work to massage that, make sure we've got the information right, and move forward. It will need all of us as white people to change. I think everyone in this audience, everyone in the district, I cannot say that more emphatically. This is hard work, but having the candid conversation is first, and then finding a plan to address the concerns is the second chapter of that work. But we intend to take it on. It's a priority for us, and we hope that we can share progress along the way.
Thank you for those words, Sandy. I appreciate all of the comments of my colleagues, and I endorse them completely. This is a journey, and there is a lot of work we need to do. And I know I can speak for myself in that I recognize that I need to change. There is learning that I need to do, and I hold myself responsible for that. And I welcome the guidance so that I can follow through with that work. So I'm really grateful for the leadership and for the opportunity to continue with this work. It's the right work for all of our kids. So thank you so much. Is there anyone else who would like to make a question or comment? I don't see any waving hands, so I hope I'm not missing anyone. Thank you all. Radius, once again, welcome so much to 287. We're glad to have you here.
Thank you so much.
We're moving on to item 7 on the agenda, which is our instructional report. We'll have an update on the Literacy Grant Award with Superintendent Lewandowski and Dr. John Voss. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you. I'll quickly turn it over to John. I'll just say in the midst of all the challenges, there are pockets of good news, and a lot of that is due to Dr. Voss. He is certainly the quiet worker in many of these things. And in fact, I can say in almost every topic we've talked about tonight, John is right there at the table influencing and working hard to move us forward. And this grant is one that he should get some credit for. So John, I'll let you explain it.
Well, thank you, Superintendent Lewandowski and Chair Neville. These are both the informational items. The first is just to update that we did receive a grant to continue our literacy work that we started 2 years ago, which has allowed us to hire coaches specifically dedicated to supporting literacy. So we're looking forward to having 4 literacy coaches now funded under this grant, as well as a new position for a family literacy specialist that will specifically provide support for the family outreach efforts that Tanya Allen has started. So we are looking forward to getting started, even though the timeline is short and there are challenges in implementing it under the current situation, but we will certainly benefit from having additional support for literacy.
Wow.
And then I can move on to the second one, and then if there's questions on either, we can
Sure.
move on
Why
from
don't
there.
why don't you just continue on to the collaborative curriculum, and then we'll pause for questions for both. Thank you.
Okay. This is another update as information on the Minnesota Partnership for Collaborative Curriculum. Since 2013, we have developed 39 courses to meet Minnesota academic standards in grades 3 through 12 in the 4 core content areas, working on behalf of over 200 partner districts and organizations around Minnesota. They were developed using digital resources under a Creative Commons licensing agreement so that they can be used as open educational resources. So now we're opening them for access statewide, releasing them to the wild, so to speak, to allow for crowdsourcing of further development and refinement. And we appreciate all of the support we've had from our members and all of the progress that we've made on this and how it's been able to benefit our curriculum resources and all of our programs as well.
Thank you. So we will take questions. First, I want to apologize, Crystal and Sam. I think my computer froze and I saw that you had raised hands were you raising your hand for the summer racial equity question, or were you asking for questions regarding the literacy grant and the collaborative curriculum?
I'm good. It was from the last topic.
It was, okay, thank you. And Sam, I know that you also had a chance to address questions, but was it from our last presentation?
Yeah, that handles from the
Okay.
racial equity during the summer. Yeah.
Thank you. So I believe Andrea Keene, you are our first question for Dr. Voss.
Thank you, Dr. I just want to congratulate you on the partnership, and it's such a cool resource. I'm wondering, is that something that you'll be sharing with our teaching and learning leadership in our home districts, or is that something we should share as board members?
We will be sharing again. We've been in contact with partners throughout, but we'll let everybody know again. And I think there'll be a couple of wider announcements too, just so all districts are aware that this is available now, may be helpful in planning for the fall and beyond. So we'll definitely keep everyone posted.
Thank you. It seems like the timing is perfect for this resource to be ready. I think it will assist a lot of teachers as they do some very different planning this year than what they're normally used to. So thank you.
Happy to help.
Mm-hmm. Any additional questions or comments? I don't see any additional raised hands. Oh, Steve Adams, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair Neville. John, I was just curious about the amount of the grant. It's kind of an odd amount, 600,000, 150. What's the 150 for?
I can't answer how MDE comes up with their calculations. It was a little bit less than we applied for. So there's a couple of activities we might reduce, but I think they have a certain amount of money that they have to award, and we probably got what was left of what we asked for.
All right. Thank you.
Additional questions or comments? Okay, well, once again, thank you, Dr. Voss. This is good timing. It's always nice to have positive news. We will move on with, there is no item 8, business services and labor relations report this evening. So our next item is board business. And we'll begin with policy review and revision, Title IX emergency policy. I'd like to welcome Michelle Axel to present this item this evening.
Thank you, Board Chair and board members. As shared in the agenda, I'm here to represent Ann Becker, General Counsel, in presenting today and recommending for board approval the Title IX emergency policy. And as I am sure you all are aware, there were sweeping changes to the Title IX regulations in which go in effect August 14th. And including in part that we have required changes to our school board policy or our school policy, the Title IX, that they'll need to be training prior to that effective date, as well as notice requirements. So as I come forward, Ann Becker provided a nice what the board needs to know around that emergency policy, given that we will be moving this forward without a first read and then a second read in this place. If I will hold the space if you have any questions. Other than that, I'd like to move forward to recommend for approval of the Title IX emergency policy.
Thank you. We will bring this forward. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved, Heather Douglas.
Second, Andrea Keene.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Andrea. Are there any questions or discussion before we take the roll call vote?
I have a question.
Ann Casey, go ahead, please.
So nothing that we see here that's different from before is it's all statutory language that is in the new regulations. That's all that's changed.
Right, and what Ann Becker put together was a nice policy that meets the minimum requirements. And as we're kind of patiently waiting also to see MSBA often produces a nice model policy, and that's currently in the works. And so as we dig in further, if need be, there will be a return to bring forward because this emergency policy is only in effect for 1 year.
Okay, that was okay. That helps. Thank you, and give our thanks to Anne for for putting this together quickly.
Yeah, yes, exactly. She is leading the charge, and I'm right behind her, supporting as I can. Thanks.
Thank you. I don't see an additional raised hand. Does anybody else have any questions or comments for discussion? Steve Adams.
Yes, thank you. I'm just curious, can you capsulize the changes? It's a 2,000-page document, I know, but what are the major changes that are being put forth?
Well, first of all, there's a new definition of sexual harassment. And in terms of an employee's conditioning in an individual's participation in an unwelcome sexual conduct, there's a change related to in regards to the whole process around a notice, an appeals, a hearing, and you know there's many more steps than would have had to have been put forward in the prior just the Title IX regulations and policy. And so that's what we're teasing out. She's managed to name the Title IX coordinator, and then the different employees, and we've been able to bring forward employees within our district who will be part of the investigation, part of the appeal, right? And in all of that process and the grievance, should that come forward. And then with that, the necessity to train all of these individuals to have the knowledge. And I also want to put forward, I think a really big piece of it is just having knowledge of or concern of needs to be brought forward in this, as well as if it does not meet that level and standard or definition of sexual harassment, it is required to be dismissed at that time. So there's a lot of complexity in this work, as I'm sure you're aware through your various districts and the work that's going on behind the scenes, and certainly appreciative of all our different resources available to us of as we learn and dig in and be prepared for and ready should and when this is presented to us.
Why is this only a temporary policy?
Say it again. I apologize.
Why is this temporary? He says it's only a 1 year.
It seemed like Sandy might want to respond, but again, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, this had not surprising, but a sudden timeline by mid-August to develop and get this passed by the board. And because of all the complexities, it's probably one of the biggest rewrites with a lot of technical legal kinds of changes that potentially need to be assessed. And as Michelle said, waiting for MSBA to weigh in on this, that we felt the most prudent thing, given that timeline, was to get the emergency policy approval and then work on it with a little more thoughtful, prolonged timeline to get it right.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any additional questions or comments before we take our vote? All right, with that, we will proceed to the roll call vote. And Crystal, could you please take us through it?
Adams.
Aye.
Brackey is an aye. Casey.
Aye.
Keen.
Yes.
Dallas. Dallas. Ruthie, it looks like you're on mute. I'll come back to you in just a minute.
Okay, I'm ready. Yes.
Oh, there you are. Fantastic. Thank you. Douglas.
Aye.
Coons.
Aye.
Marty. Thank you. Neville.
Aye.
Sant.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you all. And thank you, Michelle, for the presentation this evening. So that concludes our, concludes the policy review. Next up, there is no specific chair report, but Andrea, is there any AMSD update that you would like to share?
You know, there really is not. I'll just share that we have an upcoming board of directors meeting on Friday, August 14th. That's it.
Okay. Okay. And want to thank Juanine for the school board planning calendar and all of the additional school year information that's included in the board packet. So I invite the board to make sure that they take a look at all of those calendar dates and get them into your own schedules. There will certainly be a lot of change in the weeks ahead, so we'll just stay tuned. But I definitely appreciate all of the planning of our 287 staff. And Superintendent Lewandowski, if you could please express gratitude from the board for the myriad of people who have been working throughout the summer to make improvements in distance learning and to prepare for our upcoming school year. We're grateful.
I will do that. Thank you.
Is there anything that anyone would like to share in once around the table?
I have a question before you start that. Andrea,
Certainly.
did you say August 4th was the AMSD?
Sorry, it's Friday, August 14th.
Oh, 14th. Okay. Thank you.
Sure. And Michelle Coons.
Yeah, sorry, Madam Chair. I believe that what's happening with my lack of vote, I messed up in the beginning. I couldn't participate in the very beginning. Do I have to declare my yes retro?
Actually, I'm going to ask Crystal Brecky, is there any recorded vote which we're missing Michelle's vote?
Yeah, Michelle was absent. I believe it was just for the approval of the agenda, and it approved with the majority. So I do not think it's necessary that we go back and retroactively add you.
Okay,
I would
perfect.
agree. Thank you for checking. Sam,
Thank
I see
you.
that you have your hand raised. So Sam, go ahead, please.
I'm not sure if I'm speaking out of turn, but are we going to run around the table for board report, or
Correct.
you're asking for volunteers? Okay. Well,
Yes.
I wanted to announce unfortunately we've lost our superintendent. I called Superintendent Lewandowski and discussed it with her last week. He has taken a position over in Madison, Wisconsin. We found out in the beginning of July, and he's leaving next week. So we hired our interim superintendent as our assistant superintendent, Dr. Stephanie Barrage. She worked in Minneapolis years ago in the early 2000s. Went back to Michigan, where she was from, and was superintendent of a small district, and then has come back about 3.5 years ago. And so she's a resident again now, living in Robbinsdale, and be good to see what she does in the next year, and then we will start looking for a permanent superintendent in the near future.
Thank you for the update. I did see that announcement in the Star Tribune. That's a big change, and I definitely wish that with the search. And I think I can speak on behalf of all of us. If there's anything any of our member districts can do to support the search, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any additional items that anyone would like to share in once around the table?
I've got something, Regina. This is Andrea Keene.
Yes, Andrea, go ahead. Go ahead.
Sam Sant, I just want to express my sadness for you on the Robbinsdale board. I thought Kim's voice has been more important over the last, we've been here 4 years, so just wanted to let you know that. Also, I think Zoom meetings just, you can't say very many good things about them, but I just wanted to comment, and I don't know if you're doing this just to make us all happy, Director Steve Adam. The entire meeting, you look like you have antlers. You're positioned perfectly, and it's made me so happy. Woohoo! Fantastic.
I can't see myself very well, so I wasn't sure what I had there.
You're missing out because it has been a joy.
I'm glad I could amuse you all.
Thank you, Andrea, too.
Okay. Any additional comments or business that needs to be brought before the board before we adjourn this evening? All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
And I'm sorry, I missed who made the motion.
I had second.
Adams made the motion. Sam Sant.
Steve Adams, Sam
Second.
Sant did the second. Thank you very much. And Crystal, would you please call the roll?
Adams.
Aye.
Brackey is an aye. Casey. Aye. Keen.
Yes.
Dallas.
Yes.
Douglas.
Aye.
Coons.
Aye.
Marty.
I saw her lips move. We can't
Yep.
hear her.
There we go. I saw it. Neville.
Aye.
Sant.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. And with that, we are adjourned. Have an excellent rest of your summer, everyone. And we will stay tuned. Thank you all.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Bye, everyone.